I attended a speech and fundraising event by Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on Saturday, May 21st, 2022, in the evening at the Calvary Christian Chapel in San Jose. I'm going to give a sort of brief review of his speech and the event for those who are interested. For those who may not be familiar, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Is the leader of Children's Health Defense. He's a major attorney. He is one of the leading figures in fighting the COVID, for example, mask mandates, a lot of other things that his group and people affiliated with him have brought many lawsuits all over the country about this, won a number of them, lost some. He's a very controversial figure for his positions on vaccines, even prior to COVID. He is the son of Robert F. Kennedy, the senator from Massachusetts who was assassinated in 1968, nephew of President Kennedy. I followed him for some time, especially since the crisis started 2 years ago, but I haven't seen him in person, so I thought I would actually see what he's like in person. And I'm going to give kind of a mini review here of the speech. I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. You can hear most of the kind of stuff that he said in his podcasts and various videos that are available, mainly on alternative platforms, because he's been censored heavily by the, quote, mainstream, by Facebook, for example, which he is involved in lawsuits against. They were in this area. They had a protest at Facebook headquarters on Thursday against the censorship. I think it's fair to call what's going on censorship. Oh, you should look for him on other websites like Odyssey or Rumble or various other alternative, free uncensored sites to see what he actually has to say. He's done a long interview with Megyn Kelly recently, for example, if you really want to see his points of view, which I don't think if you've not heard them, I think you really should listen to them. In my opinion, many of them are correct, some maybe not so correct. I'll talk about that a little bit in the actual review. This was probably 200-300 people, maybe 30 people at the VIP reception. It had a little bit of a sort of a Hollywood celebrity rock star kind of feel. He came in, he signed books, he shook your hand. This was a friendly audience. I mean, very receptive to what he was saying. There was lots of clapping and cheering and so forth. There was very few people there, I would say, that were, neutral or hostile to him. That's sort of the echo bubble phenomenon, right? Where everybody goes and listens to the people that tell them what they want to hear or what they've sort of concluded. The Calvary Christian Church, it was very evangelical. They had an intro by a pastor that was quite religious, as well as a presentation by what appeared to be another ranking figure in the church or affiliated with them in some way. The Calvary Christian Chapel is what used to be known as the Jesus movement or the Jesus freaks back in the 60s and 70s when I was a little kid, which was kind of hippies who converted to evangelical kind of fundamentalist Christianity. So it's kind of a weird merger of kind of the liberal hippie background and very conservative, actually, Protestant Christianity. It started out in Orange County in a church that happened to be really close to the Huntington Beach and the Newport Beach where all the hippies went, right? They were all partying and having fun, and this group expanded. So I had found it a little odd, this kind of weird marriage of the Kennedys and this what seemed like a very conservative evangelical Christian church, but it actually makes a certain amount of sense if you know the history of the Calvary Christian Chapel movement. Okay, so what was good about it? It was nice to see RFK in person. He's very charismatic despite his voice problem. He has a problem with his voice that he developed in his 40s, back in the 1990s. So it shakes a lot, especially it shook for a while when he was starting the speech, and it really kind of goes away. I mean, it's not that noticeable once he gets going, at least a fair amount of time. I've seen that on podcasts and so forth. He says that's what happens, and that's what I saw up close. I was seated right in the front, right near him, so I was able to watch that up close. He seems very sincere, very passionate about what he's talking about. There's very little sign in his presentation that I would argue insincerity, which you sometimes see with some political figures if you're not mesmerized by them. He basically covered a lot of the same points that, as I said, you can go watch these points and then you'll hear them pretty much the same thing on various videos and interviews that he's done. He argues them very well. He's a lawyer. He has a legal degree. He's, I suspect, a pretty good lawyer. Comes across very well, very persuasive person from a political family that goes back at least 4 generations. So they're very good on camera. He has a great smile. They're very good at being persuasive. It's a family business, if you like. Overall, I thought it was a good speech, and it covered a lot of the points that he usually covers. So what didn't I like, or what might have been different? It was very choreographed in such a way that he really didn't have to handle, it seemed to me, hard questions. The VIP reception was basically just came in and shook your hand and signed your book and got a picture with you. It was fun, but he never got himself in the position where he was fielding questions that he might not have been prepared for. There was a Q&A session right at the end of the speech that consisted, as far as I could tell, of 3, quote, email questions. So they didn't like pass a microphone or microphones around to the audience and let people really just say whatever they wanted to say and ask a question. There are some legitimate reasons for doing that. As probably many people know, you will often get somebody who comes up and gives a speech or is very antagonistic. But overall, I like to see that, how does the person handle the questions and the things that aren't on the script that they're reading from. That I thought was sort of a weakness. I can understand why they might do that, but I do think more interaction, actual live unscripted interaction with the audience overall would be better. Of course, there are some hard questions that could have been asked if that had been happening. I had a few that I would have asked. For example, I would have asked him to clarify exactly what he thinks about vaccines in general. He's often a little vague about that. So this is important to kind of set the context a little bit. When you look at people who are labeled, smeared as anti-vaccine, they actually cover a very broad range. You have people, and there's lots of these now with COVID, who are actually very pro-vaccine. They've been vaccinated out to here. They believe in vaccines. They believe that vaccines work in general. That's one group. But in the case of COVID, or maybe a certain other vaccine, they've looked into it and say, hey, we haven't done proper testing. We're playing Russian roulette with this technology. There's lots of evidence of severe adverse effects in this particular vaccine. There are also people who appear to be just completely convinced that vaccines across the board are overall bad. In other words, if you did highly controlled studies, you would see the all-cause mortality rate is higher in the vaccinated populations than not, things like that. So they basically think vaccines don't work at all. That's the other maybe extreme and just want to get rid of them. That's the you could fairly call those people anti-vax. They really think vaccines of all sorts don't work and are harmful. That's a very, I would say, controversial or a position. I suspect the percentage of the population that thinks that is pretty small. But there's actually a spectrum across there. In between, you have people who are very concerned about certain vaccines, don't think certain vaccines work. And RFK is actually, when you listen carefully, a little ambiguous of where exactly he falls in that category. Although he's quick to say he's not anti-vaccine. In fact, in the speech, he said that he took the flu vaccine every year in the 1990s until his throat problem, or not throat, his speaking problem developed. It's called something like dysphonia, a type of dysphonia, causes his voice to shake. And later, he found that this was actually listed, that's what he claimed, as a potential side effect of the flu vaccine. But he didn't actually think that at the time. So my point is, people fall on quite a spectrum of where they feel on terms of vaccine safety or skepticism, contrary to what can only be described as propaganda from pharmaceutical companies and government, which tries to present everyone as completely fanatically crazy opposed to all vaccines. I wanted to clarify where he stands on that, for example. Another question would be what he thinks about these assertions by some people like Andrew Kaufman or Tom Cowan or some other figures that in fact vaccines have never been proven, or excuse me, viruses have actually never been proven to exist. They've never been isolated. That in fact all these diseases that are blamed on the measles virus or the flu is blamed on influenza are caused by something else. And I was curious what his position would be on that. And there's in fact many questions that could have come up had there been a unscripted kind of more of a Q&A sessions, either in the general meeting or the VIP reception. There are many things that people could have asked. And yes, that can lead to embarrassing things or awkward moments, or perhaps a concern that someone who's kind of a living target like he is, okay, I ad lib an answer to the thing and then it's all over YouTube and it really puts me in a bad light. I can understand why you would try to script these things very carefully, but overall, I think you need to get out there and not do these scripted PR type things, but that's personal opinion. Again, overall, he did a great job in presenting his point of view. You really need to go through like other videos or some of the documentation on the Children's Health Defense website to kind of really look at what's being said and make up your own mind. There's no substitute for that. You should always actually try to check everything, check these types of claims, whether they're coming from the government, from people like Dr. Fauci, who's often proven misleading or in fact flat out false, has even admitted to lying to the public about the masks, claiming it was sort of a noble lie to preserve masks for medical workers. Oh, I did it for greater good. There's no like funny political motive there. The point is, you should check these things yourself and not rely just on a speech by RFK or by me either. Obviously, that's easier said than done because we all have limited time. So overall, it was an interesting experience. It was a very good speech. It was not much in it that I thought was different from things he said before. It was very similar to what you see on the videos that are available. Again, he's heavily censored on the quote mainstream. You want to look in other sources like Odyssey, Rumble, some of these other video sites and various other places away from Google is not the best place to search for him. Facebook is not the best place to find him. Overall, a good solid job and interesting speech and a good speaker despite a serious speech impediment.
Where can you find Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who has been censored on a lot of platforms, either completely or partially? His organization is called Children's Health Defense. It's a .org, so here we have it, the actual website, and they have an email mailing list that gives you all their news and other content. You can see some of the stuff here, and you can get from here to various videos and so forth. Their news they put out on the website and the mailing list, all kinds of news articles related to mostly COVID the last couple of years, but other topics as well. He has sued a lot of companies over their products, over alleged toxicity and problems with the products, environmental problems. That goes way back, long before COVID. These vary, in my opinion, in quality and reliability. Some are pretty good, hold up really well. Some of them are a little histrionic. So, take with a grain of salt, certainly, the news articles. If you navigate around here, you can find detailed articles on their positions on COVID and references to scientific materials and so forth. This is the Health Freedom Defense Fund, which is part of the lawsuit against the mandates for masks on airplanes. That that mask mandate was thrown out by a court in federal court in Florida, I think, a few weeks ago. And they have a strong affiliation, I don't understand the details, with Kennedy and Children's Health Defense. But just another place to look. I mentioned Odyssey. Odyssey is one place you can find videos of his. Probably a better source is Rumble, which you can find his interviews with Megyn Kelly. I'm not sure if this is him, but this is something about him, and Steve Bannon's War Room, and a range of other things. So you can find out and see what he actually says. You can see most of the type of stuff that he talked about in the speech that I watched on Saturday here in San Jose. You can actually see it wasn't very different. It's basically the same points. Much of the delivery is similar. I wouldn't say that there was a radical difference between what he says in person, or even a very large difference at all, between what he says in person and what he says on these videos. One thing that doesn't come across in the videos is he's really tall. He's like 6'2", maybe 6'3". He has very good posture. It doesn't necessarily come across that way in the videos. online, but in person he's very charismatic and he stands very tall. So again, the first place to go is Children's Health Defense, but it's well worth watching his actual videos. You can see what he has to say and investigate it yourself. Don't go to fact checkers or places like MSNBC. Go to actual scientific papers and that kind of content. Really look into it. You can find a lot of stuff on PubMed. I think it's still relatively uncensored. So you can track down various subjects on PubMed as well to kind of try to verify or find problems with what he and his associates are saying. So again, Children's Health Defense is the first place to go to find out more information about Robert F. Kennedy, Jr. This concludes this video presentation. If you like this video, please click like. Please click subscribe and the notification bell if you would like to receive more content from us. You can avoid internet censorship by subscribing directly to our RSS news feed. Please consider sharing the link by email and on your website or blog, in addition to liking, upvoting, or sharing on increasingly censored, advertising beholden, big company social media. We have encountered such censorship. Mathematical software is developing algorithms and software to automate data analysis, reducing the risks of costly errors and increasing the predictive power of the results. You can support our work financially by subscribing on our Patreon page, https://www.patreon.com/mathsoft, or scanning the QR code in the lower right corner.